Now, Skomer is known for its seabirds. Not only is it home to 40,000 spicy penguins, but it's home to a plethora of other species, including guillemots, razorbills, and over half the world's population of Manx shearwater. But there's plenty of other species that you might be lucky enough to see as well. So in this video, I'm going to be showing you absolutely everything you need to bring on your visit to Skomer, as well as all the shots that you can expect to get on your day. And of course, if you have any questions at all, please feel free to put them down in the comments down below and I'll try and answer as many as possible. So let's start by talking about the most important thing when it comes to Skomer, as well as probably the main reason that you clicked on this video, which is of course the puffins. The main puffin season runs from mid-March to mid-August, although the activity does vary between these times due to changes in their behaviours. Early in the season, puffins are scoping out and maintaining their burrows, and may not spend a whole lot of time on the island. It isn't until early April that they will be on the island for longer periods of time, as this is when egg laying starts to occur. During this time, you're likely to see mating behaviours such as billing, which involves the puffins batting each other's beaks. And it's a really nice behaviour to see and leads to some quite intimate looking photos. And I actually like the photos far better than I thought I would. Now, puffins will lay and incubate a single egg for between 36 and 45 days, which brings us to the middle of May, during which time there will be a change in the activity of the birds, as they'll now have to feed a rather adorable and hungry fuzzball, which is known as puffling. And as such, you'll have the opportunity to photograph puffins with mouthfuls of sand eel, which is often the holy grail of most puffin photographers. Now, after 40 days of feeding these chicks, they'll be ready to fledge, and up to this point they may become more adventurous, so you may start to see them at the edges of burrows. From mid-July to mid-August, the colony will start to thin as the birds start to make their way off to the winter feeding grounds. But don't worry, they'll be back next year. So if you've made it this far in the video, I'll assume you're completely sold on going to Skomer. So you might be thinking, how do I get there? Now, the first thing you're obviously going to have to do is to book your ticket. They come online for the following year every October, and as you can imagine, it's very, very popular. So you'll want to keep an eye on the website, although when we visited the island this time, we were given a fantastic tip which is going to give you the best chance to book your ticket, and that's to become a member of the South Wales Wildlife Trust. Now, it's very cheap to join, and ultimately it's going to act like a mailing list which is going to let you know when tickets become available. And there's obviously lots of other benefits which come with being a member of the South Wales Wildlife Trust, including the maintenance of all their reserves across South Wales. And then once the big day has arrived and it's your time to go down to Skomer Island, you want to make sure that you're down there 1 hour before your boat sets off. And this is going to give you plenty of time to get checked in and make sure you don't miss that all-important boat. In terms of parking, there is a car park which is very close to the main jetty. Although bear in mind that the car park is owned by the National Trust rather than the Wildlife Trust. This means that car parking isn't included in your ticket, and as such you're going to have to bring along a little bit of extra money to pay for car parking. And a top tip here would be to bring change along with you. I know it's harder and harder to get in the modern times and everything's contactless and whatnot, but bring along some change. I think it was £7 for us on the day, and it's just going to speed up that car parking process so much more than if you bring along contactless. Right, let's move on to the fun stuff, which is what to bring along on your trip. So let's start by talking about the most important thing, which is the camera and the lens. For me, I was using the Sony a7 III and the Sigma 150-600. But I want to keep this video more general so you can apply any of the concepts that I talk about in this video to the gear that you have at home. I'm going to put this down now, it's well heavy. So starting off with focal lengths, as you saw, I'm using a lens which goes from 150mm to 600mm. Having a zoom lens like this allows me not only to get the tight portraits, which is ever popular, but it will also allow me to zoom out slightly more and get some more environmental portraits. And I think that having a lens which does go wider to 150 allows you to incorporate some of the landscape elements, which is so important to telling the overall story of the location that you're visiting. And in fact, the unique thing about Skomer is that at times 150mm was too close for the wildlife, which is incredible when you consider just how small the puffins are. They're about the size of a toaster, and the fact that they were more than filling my frame at times is absolutely incredible. And this goes to show that in places like Skomer, you can get away with shorter lenses, like a 70-200 would be absolutely perfect for visiting there. And in fact, lenses like the 70-200 can make it easier when you're doing photography of birds in flight. And this is because the puffins are just so rapid that having a wider field of view can make it easier to track them, especially when you're just learning photography. And there were plenty of people on the day just using their phones, and speaking to them on the boat afterwards, they were more than happy with the results that they got. Now, a couple of extra things that I'd really recommend bringing along on the day. One would be a water bottle. There is a farmhouse which is found in the middle of the island where you can fill up your water bottle, but generally you're going to be quite far away, so having a water bottle on hand can be really helpful, especially when you're out in the elements for quite a long time. And then the other thing, of course, to bear in mind with being out in the open is to make sure you've got plenty of sun cream with you, because it's quite a long day, so you want to make sure you're not getting burnt and not getting heat stroke, and you're quite far away from the mainland and you don't want silly things like this ruining your day. Okay, right, let's bring some energy back and we're going to go into our photography tips. Puffins are the perfect contrast between jet black and they are bright white. And this is really going to push your camera very hard between trying to keep the detail between these two tones. Now, my first and probably my biggest tip when it comes to photography is to make sure you're underexposing. This is because it's far easier to expose for your highlights and retain that detail and bring your shadows up in post than it is to try and expose your shadows and bring the detail back from your highlights, because it will generally end up blown out and you're not going to get that detail back at all. And in terms of how far to underexpose, for me, I always like to expose by 2/3 of a stop. So initially when you do underexpose, your photos are going to look more like this, but with a little bit of tweaking in post-production, you can make your photos go from looking like this through to looking more like this. Now, an important thing to consider when we are talking about trying to retain this level of detail is to make sure that we're using the largest file size we can. This means that we're going to have as much detail to work with as possible, which is a big reason why I think shooting in RAW is just so important. So one thing I do want to talk about in terms of gear, obviously I am using a tripod today, but we have to be really careful either side. The paths are very narrow and either side of us are puffin burrows. So we want to make sure that we're not disturbing them at all. But also I'm going to have to make sure that I'm very aware of what's around me. Okay, so people could be coming down the paths either way. And if they do come down, I have to prioritize them getting round because I don't want them to step off the paths and tread on any of these puffin burrows. So picking up the tripod and just being really spatially aware. You're here for 4 hours. You're going to get the shot at another time. It's absolutely fine just to wait a few moments. And being spatially aware will have other huge benefits as well. For example, I think that most people will be looking out to sea, which is great, but often you're going to end up with photographs of the back of puffins' heads as they also look out to sea and look out towards their next meal. But as we said earlier, the puffin burrows are everywhere. So actually looking behind you can lead to some other fantastic photographs of puffins looking out to sea with the burrows behind them. And it's not just birds on the island, there are a few mammal species. The biggest being this little guy just behind us, which is of course the rabbit. There's also a Skomer vole, which is an endemic species which is only found on Skomer, which is really rather cool. And there's a rather infamous mammal that you might see on your trip to Skomer Island. We are told in the gift shop that his name is Hercules. The reason being is he's absolutely massive. So we didn't actually get to see him this time, but on our first trip to Skomer Island, we saw this absolutely colossal figure just fast asleep on one of the boats. Apparently this is a behaviour that he does a lot, and it's this behaviour that's warranted his name. So if you do get to have a look out for him, make sure you have your camera ready because it's a fantastic shot to get. It's absolutely hilarious. And it's about 4 miles to go around the whole island. But if you're specifically looking for puffins, then there are 2 places that I really recommend. The first is the Wick, which has 2 very steep cliffs either side of a central bay. And this gives you really beautiful views of the cliff sides. But then there's also walks which go either side of it, so you can get some nice different views from there as well. And the other area that I recommend is High Cliff, which is a bit more flat. And both of them are absolutely great places to see puffins. The really good thing about High Cliff and the Wick is that they are on opposite sides of the island. What this means is that you get completely different conditions at both locations, with the main condition you need to think about being the wind. Being an island which is very exposed, the wind can be very strong, and this very much affects the flight speed of the puffins. When the puffins are coming into land with the wind behind them, they absolutely fly, and it can be very difficult to get bird in flight shots. Whereas if you simply go to the other side of the island and have the wind coming from behind you, then the birds will be coming into land at a much slower speed, making it far easier to get bird in flight shots. And as such, I'd recommend visiting both places in the day, not only for a change of scenery, but also if you find that you're struggling to get birds in flight shots at one place, then you may find it easier at the other. Finally, thank you very much for watching, and I will catch you at the next one.